Welcome to Kevin Deal Photography, where I take you on my journey through photography. On today's episode, we're going to be doing an in-depth review of the 17mm f1.8 lens from TT Artisan. Welcome to today's episode. If you're not familiar with Kevin Deal Photography, we do gear reviews, tips, techniques, and tutorials, and sometimes we dive into film. If any of that sounds appealing to you, click the subscribe button below. For all of you who are back to Kevin Deal Photography, welcome back. And for all of you where this is your first time here at the beginning of every episode, I ask for donations to BIG, which is an organization that helps intellectually disabled adults adapt to jobs in the real world. Also, for all of you who are interested in presets, I make presets for both Capture One and Lightroom. If that's something you want to check out, I'll put a link in the description below. But to the subject of today's episode. If you have been a follower of this channel for a while, you've probably come across many videos of mine where I review third-party lenses for the Fuji X mount. There's certainly no shortage of that content on this channel. Several of those reviews have been for TT Artisan lenses. TT Artisan has proven themselves to make fantastic entry-level lenses for the Fuji X mount, and I've even been impressed with their offerings for the Lumix L mount as well. They recently reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing a review of their newly released 17mm 1.8 for the Fuji X mount. I gladly accepted because when I saw how small this lens was, yet maintained a maximum aperture of f1.8, I was intrigued. A lot of ultrawides are chunky, and I've really only maybe reviewed one other small ultrawide like this, and it was the Viltrox 15mm 1.7 Air, which proved to be a fantastic lens, but TT Artisan lenses tend to be a few dollars less, and we'll see if this one measures up. When I look at it, the first thing that immediately stands out to me is how compact this is on my XE2. If you're watching this and you own one of those smaller Fuji bodies, the balance is definitely going to appeal to you. I'm also noticing a metal lens hood, which I'm assuming is aluminum. It feels robust but not heavy. It makes this lens feel a bit more premium. I'm certainly excited about it, so let's take this guy out into the real world and see what kind of shots we can get on it. But before we get started, let's go over the specs. The TT Artisan 17mm f1.8 is an APS-C autofocus lens made for the Sony E and Fuji X mount systems. Its 17mm focal length gives you a perspective of 25.5mm in full frame. It has an aperture range of f1.8 to f16. It has an angle of view of 81 degrees. It has a minimum focusing distance of 7 inches or 0.18 meters. Its optical design is 14 elements in 10 groups, and it has 6 rounded aperture blades. It has a front filter thread size of 52 millimeters. It has a USB-C port built into the lens cap for firmware updates. Its dimensions are 2.5 by 2.3 inches or 63.5 by 58.4 millimeters. It comes in at a weight of around 6 ounces or 170 grams, and it comes in at a street price of $148 US. So on paper, for the money, those sound like some pretty awesome specs, but we don't do reviews of specs, we do reviews of products. So let's review this product and take them out into the field right now. Okay, so I'm here in the Big Easy, New Orleans, and I'm really close to Bourbon Street and the sun is about to go down. So I think that gives me a fantastic opportunity to test out this TT Artisan 17mm f1.8 for street photography. And I also have this Viltrox 15mm 1.7, kind of close in focal length, kind of close in maximum aperture. So I'll do some tests between these two lenses as well. So without further ado, let's shoot some street photography. Big Easy, a city where they actually have to wash the streets because they're covered in vomit. But people like to have their fun there. It is an old town. It's a charming town, and I love shooting the old buildings, even if people get drunk and leave their hats on poles. Now, this is a maximum aperture 1.8 lens, which makes it suitable for shooting at night. And of course, you can get right up to things and, well, look at that bokeh. So overall, I think this lens is definitely good for general photography, and of course, you can shoot it well in the dark. All right, a quick file comparison between the TT Artisan 17 1.8 and the Viltrox 15mm 1.7. As you can see right here, the TT Artisan is very heavily vignetted wide open and very soft in the corners. The sharpness in the center is also soft. As you stop down, you pretty much have to get to about f4 before you see quite a bit of sharpness in the middle of the frame on the TT Artisan, but as you go to the outside, it never truly gets sharp in the corners, and the vignette is even heavy, even at f8. Now, when you look at the Viltrox, when you stop down to about f2, f2.8, it's incredibly sharp in the center. It resolves really well in the corners. The vignette clears up around 2.8, and when you get to f5.6 and f11, this lens is noticeably sharper than the TT Artisan. Comparing the minimum focusing distance, the TT Artisan actually can get about 2 inches closer, so that is a win for the TT Artisan. I'd say overall the Viltrox is a little bit more punchy, the color reproduction is somewhat similar on both of them, but the chromatic aberration, both wide open and stop down, is pretty heavy on the TT Artisan. For those of you wondering about distortion, this is a shot right here that I took on the TT Artisan 17mm. Once I did a keystone correction, you can see how much distortion the lens created on this building. Now, let's go back to my studio and let me tell you what I liked and didn't like about this TT Artisan 17mm f1.8. Okay, so now that I've had some time to shoot with this lens, let me tell you what I think about it. Let's start with the areas where I think this lens could be a little better. First off, let's talk about the marketing. There are upwards of 1 million words in the English language, and for some reason, TT Artisan decided to call this AF 17mm f1.8 the Air lens. Well, their direct competitor, Viltrox, already released a 9, 15, 23, 35, and 56mm Air lens. Now, was this some sort of a massive oversight? Was this intentional? I'm not sure, but in this competitive marketplace, the name is kind of confusing. If you're the type of shooter who prefers an aperture ring, this lens does not include one. At this price point, I don't think that's an unreasonable omission, but if that's a feature that is important to you, you'll need to look at more expensive options. I've mentioned this in every TT Artisan review, and I'm going to mention it here. I'm still not a fan of the firmware updates being handled through the rear lens cap on all TT Artisan lenses. Many competitors place a USB-C port directly on the lens itself, which is a much cleaner solution. By putting it on the lens cap, you're introducing additional contact points, which creates more potential failure points. On top of that, if you misplace or lose your rear lens cap, you lose the ability to upgrade your firmware altogether. Finally, when it comes to image quality, there are some limitations with this lens. The vignetting and corner sharpness never fully resolve on the extreme outer edges of the frame. This could be especially frustrating for landscape or architectural photographers. I don't typically mind a little bit of vignetting when shooting wide open, since it often improves when stopped down or can be corrected in post. However, in this case, the vignetting remains fairly strong, even stopped down to f8, and correcting it in post never quite produced a clean, consistent corner. This lens also had ghosting and flaring issues. Not abnormal for this price point, but noteworthy. Additionally, this lens does exhibit chromatic aberration in high contrast areas, even when stopped down. Another con I saw is that they only make this for Sony and for Fuji. I don't think they make this for Nikon, who do make APS-C cameras. So if you're a Nikon user, I'm sorry, but that's definitely a con of this lens. All right, now that we've talked about the cons, let's talk about the pros that may win you over with this lens. This lens is compact and lightweight, which makes it a great match for smaller camera bodies like the Fuji XE series. If you're a photographer who's always on the go, the size and weight alone make this a really attractive option to carry around. The build quality is another standout feature. It feels solid and well constructed with a nicely machined lens hood that actually feels more premium than what you would get with something like the more expensive Viltrox Air series. The barrel itself is robust, and while it's not officially weather sealed, I did end up using it in a downpour on accident, and it held up surprisingly well. It handled the rain without issue and protected the camera, but of course, use common sense and dry it off if it gets wet, and don't make it a habit of taking this lens out in the rain, but it does have something inside of it that protected it when I experienced a downpour. The autofocus on this lens was pretty middle of the road, nothing mind-blowing, but nothing Fuji is mind-blowing when it comes to autofocus, even their first-party native lenses. So I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, and the TT Artisan performed as well as just about any other third-party lens I've tested for the Fuji X mount on this channel. Another area where this lens outperformed my more expensive Viltrox Air 15mm is the minimum focusing distance. I was able to get about 7 inches away from my subject before hitting the limit of focus. That's roughly 2 inches closer than the Viltrox. Now, does that matter to everybody? Not necessarily, especially with it being a wide angle lens, but being able to get closer can help you create a bit more subject separation and open up some more creative possibilities, especially with wide angle shots. Personally, I love getting in close, so for me, that was definitely a pro. Now, while I did mention some limitations when it comes to image quality, I still walked away with photos I really liked. If you're on a tight budget, this lens absolutely is capable of producing strong results. For my shots in Louisiana, the center sharpness was pretty solid. The images had good contrast, and the color rendering was pleasing overall. That said, I do think the Viltrox Air series delivers better overall image quality, but it also costs about $100 more. Which brings me to one of the biggest pros of this lens, which is price. At $148, this lens offers a lot of value. Its closest competitor at this focal length is the Viltrox 15mm f1.7 Air, and that comes in at $239. And while I do think the Viltrox overall performs better, it should because it's priced higher. So for those of you on a strict budget, this lens makes a decent case for itself, especially considering how capable it is. So, who is this lens for? I'd say beginners, travelers, and street photographers, particularly those looking to keep costs down. If you're someone who needs edge-to-edge sharpness, like a landscape or architectural photographer, or you're simply chasing the best possible image quality, this probably isn't the lens for you. In that case, it's worth saving up and investing in something more higher end. If you feel like this lens is for you, I'll leave links in the description below. That does it for today's episode. What did you think of my review of this AF 17mm 1.8 Air from TT Artisan? Tell me about it in the comments below. And if you're a fan of this channel, I humbly ask you to click the subscribe button below. And until next time, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.